told that story from the stage today because it's such a brutal thing to talk about. I've seen the worst cases of child abuse, kids cut with knives and burned, children who have either been orphaned or neglected or abandoned with terminal illnesses or debilitating conditions, so things that make them bedridden. The police would find these children and they'd take them to orphanages where they would ultimately just die. I have zero desire to be the world's most successful charity, but in the meantime, the children are suffering and they're dying, and humanitarian aid is making it worse instead of making it better. It's hard for me to believe that in this modern world, there are kids who are tied up and suffering and starving and dying in institutions that think that's acceptable. Unfortunately, some of these systems are so broken that kids get put back in these situations and they die within days. Wow. Exactly what happened to my nephew. If a child's not being advocated for and they live in a country that isn't at the capacity to protect them, this is what happens.
Welcome to a special episode of the Real Mentors podcast. As always, I'm your host, Sean Martin. Today, I have the pleasure of having such an amazing, inspiring guest. We're live at Ken Jocelyn's Growth Stack Drive Mastermind here in Atlanta, and I was so moved after I heard her story and what she's trying to do in the world that I asked Ken for permission to borrow his team and shoot this podcast guerrilla style. And today I've got Dr. Iza Correll, the youngest recipient of the Muhammad Ali Humanitarian Global Citizen Award, I believe it is. I didn't want to screw that up. I didn't have time to prepare, but Iza is on a mission to transform lives in rural Kenya and also around the world. And I wanted to share her story today because, as I said, I was so moved from the stage. I was called to action. The show is Real Mentors. REAL is the acronym, as I told you, Real Examples Altering Lives. And I can't think of a more moving story than the one that you shared with us today, and how the entire room rallied around you, not only to raise money, but to step into purpose, help you negotiate some of the difficulties of putting such an amazing organization. So you got people who volunteered not only to donate today, but to be on the board and help you structure the organization and build a future that's sustainable, because we all believed immediately so much in what you're doing. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to do this.
Yes, and thank you for, on such short notice, being willing to do this, because as you said, you don't touch down in the States too much anymore. So tell us a little bit about where in Kenya you're located, and more about the hospital.
Yeah, the hospital is based in Migori, Kenya. So if you think Lake Victoria, Tanzania border, about 20 minutes from the Tanzania border. It's a very rural region of Kenya. Definitely a complete accident that I ended up there, but it's a beautiful spot because we are able to service even kids we've had come from Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. It's very close to both borders.
Really? So it's kind of an intersection of those three countries.
Just 20-minute drive from the Tanzania border.
Well, in such a huge country, that's a pretty interesting place to land. Let's talk about that. Where are you originally from?
I'm originally from a place called Somerset, Kentucky. It's on Lake Cumberland. It's about south of Lexington, Kentucky would be the closest landmark.
I've heard of Lexington, so. And I just got to go to Louisville, and I went to the Kentucky Derby for the first time.
I've never been. Can you believe that?
We've got to put that on the bucket list. You got to come back home just for that one, because it's your hometown.
It's true.
How'd you find your way from Kentucky all the way out to rural Kenya? And I mean, what just inspired you at the tender age of 20 as someone who presents as you do? So let's be honest here. Blonde girl from Kentucky. In Africa.
A pageant girl at the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, the story just gets better and better. I'm finding out more about her as you do as well. How'd that all come about?
It's really wild to think about, but I was at a conference and I had literally drawn out of the hat, if you could live any life, what would it be and why? And as I said, I was a pageant girl, so I had my answer, and I just stood up at this conference. I was like, oh, well, if I could live any life, theoretically, I would want to find the world's most vulnerable children and help them get medical care. The reason I said that, I'd just given to an organization that fixes cleft smile, so it was on my mind, okay, if I could do anything, that's what I would do. But I had just finished astronomy so that I wouldn't have to take a science class. I was dyslexic. I hated math. I was not on the pre-med path. But I remember it was a room of about 2,000 people at this conference, but this was a little icebreaker group. And the guy on the stage, he got up, he's like, did anyone meet anyone interesting today? What did you learn about the people in your group? First guy who stands up, he's like, yes, I met the most amazing woman. She's helping vulnerable children get these life-saving surgeries and all these things. And I remember my eyes were huge. I was like, I'm nothing. Like I haven't done anything of that. And people would come up and be like, wow. And I'd be like, no, it's just a confusion. The question was, and I was trying to explain it. And then one person, I can't even remember their face, their name, anything about them. But I gave him the whole spiel. No, that's not me. And he's like, well, if that's the life you want to be living, then, why aren't you living it? And it hit me like a truck. And in that moment, I remember pulling out my phone and changing my major. I was going into my junior year of college the next week. And I just was like, okay, what's it like to be pre-med? And right there on the spot, ended up Googling medical opportunities in Africa, started looking, thought I'd go to Uganda, accidentally ended up in Kenya. But I'm telling you, when I had no reason to go, and that first semester of pre-med, I was a straight A student before that. I was in the honors college, good. I got my first F. I was like, how am I even going to apply to medical school? No one has an F on their transcript going into medical school, PA school, whatever I was wanting to do at the time. And I was like, you know what? I've still got to do it. And when I got to Kenya, it was literally the week after I'd failed general chemistry, or maybe it was even algebra. I don't know. It was awful. I got there and I was like, man, I have to try. Like I saw the faces of these children who couldn't get access to healthcare. And I'll tell you, the entire time I was going for it, I didn't think it was going to happen. Right up to the board exams, I never believed that I was capable, that I was going to be the person who could do it, that I was even going to get into the program, let alone pass the boards. And it was literally just tears every single day. And then, eventually, when one miracle happens, and the next miracle happens, and the next miracle happens, you start to just believe like, hey, I'm going to do it. And that's how I got there.
You mentioned something telling, which is you didn't feel like you were enough. And I think that is the human story, no matter where you come from, what you look like. Mm-hmm. It's rare that someone feels like enough.
No.
You've got to feel pain, and you've got to experience pain, and you've got to get past the pain. Yeah. To build that confidence, to start believing in yourself and saying, I am enough.
1,000,000%.
You're 20 when you make this decision.
Yeah.
Now you finish your schooling here, or do you finish over there?
I did in Kentucky, and then I was going back and forth. Like I did some training in Swaziland and in Kenya, and all while I was studying at the University of Kentucky. But they were dark years, to be honest. I always say nobody champions the person who has the dream. You get the congratulations, you get the awards after you've already done it.
Oh yeah.
And the worst years of bullying of my entire life were when I was in college. I didn't have any friends. My classmates didn't support me. I had dyslexia, I had anxiety, I had all these things going on to where I needed a little bit extra time to take my tests. I needed to take them in another room. Everyone hated that. Everyone would be like, well, you're not gonna have extra time when you're a PA. None of us are gonna have extra time with patients. Would just I remember we had a Keurig and there was a girl who would just cut me in line like I was invisible every day, just very outwardly unsupportive. And I hate to talk about it because I love my school. I was actually inducted into the Hall of Fame at my university, but it's funny, not one classmate came. And that's sometimes how it is. Sometimes you go about these things very alone. You don't get the congratulations. You don't feel worthy. I believed them. I also didn't think I deserved to be there. But what I know looking back is wow, I had to be there.
And it's safe to say that's what made you.
Yeah.
That's what gave you the thick skin.
I think you get the confidence, you get the success by doing things you are not qualified to do. I think that's really the secret. And the more you get around really successful people who have done these incredible things, you just learn it's the audacity. It's not the skill.
and no one could see it. And you said it best.
Yeah.
No one's going to congratulate you, atta girl, pat you on the back and say, great job, until the job's done. The proof is there. And even after being inducted into your university's Hall of Fame, no one came to celebrate you. No. So it still hurts on some level, but I've got to think that at this point in the journey, there's fulfillment. And you still haven't gotten to where you were. And we talked about that on stage. And some of the numbers that you threw out to make this happen. were numbers that, admittedly, a lot of us in the room kind of piss away.
Yeah, exactly.
We piss it away on stuff. And a couple of people got up and urged us all to think bigger and support bigger and give without the thought of, hesitation. And I can't say enough about your vulnerability up there, because you were honest. This has not been easy, nor would you think it would be in rural Kenya. So you're not in downtown, any metropolitan area where you've got all the creature comforts. What was that like, just upping and leaving to go to a foreign country to do something that very few people believed in? Were your parents supportive? Did you have a support system around you? Who did believe in you other than you?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, with time, now my parents are so supportive. But in the beginning, I'll just say my dad is a nervous guy.
He's your dad.
Yeah.
Let's give him some credit.
Yeah.
He wanted to protect you, probably.
Yeah, he's a bit of a germaphobe. And so the idea, when we were kids, he didn't even want us going to public restrooms because he's afraid we were going to transmit something. And so me going in and working with some of the sickest kids, these highly contagious things, HIV, AIDS, all these different things I work with every day. It was not and moving across the world, these were not on his radar. But now the biggest supporter, the biggest enabler of what I do, and he, got the call just like I did, at times where he made some big decisions that helped me to be able to do what I do in a huge way. I think for a long time it was team me.
Right.
I remember sending out 1,000 letters, and that was the kind of funny moment I had when I saw this building, the building that I dreamed up. It was right in front of me, and I was like, I just have to send out 300 letters or 1,000 letters to get people to donate $300.
Right.
If 1,000 people donate $300, which sounds so small to me in my head at the time, then I'll have a hospital building. And I remember getting no letters back, and then a month later getting one from an uncle just telling me how dumb of a decision that would be and why. I got so many rejections. I remember people calling me in, even these big. One of my favorite stories to tell is there's this huge philanthropy type billionaire company in Kentucky that funds a lot of different projects, and I'd written them very humbly telling them I would name the entire hospital after them. I just had this vision and this need, and would they consider? And they're like, come into our office. I'd never missed a day of school in my life, and I remember taking off class, driving up there, being so excited, they could do this in one swoop. It would be nothing to them. And I remember this man just laughing when I walked in, and I sat across the desk from him, and he was like, I just wanted to see the face of the person who would have, the courage to reach out to a company that funds the greater bluegrass about taking care of children in Africa, and just laughed. And it was so ironic because 1 year later is when I received, the Muhammad Ali Humanitarian Award, and they had a big event in my honor. And this is an award that was won by, President Jimmy Carter, Michael J. Fox. I did not feel like I belonged there in any way. It was quite a shock to get that award. But I remember looking over, it was so funny. I looked at the table right next to my table, and that organization had sponsored a table at my event for my award. And probably not putting any type of association, remembering who I was or what it was, but because it was the Ali family and everything.
Did you look over and
I was just like, oh, the irony, the irony of someone who laughed in my face is now, probably paid thousands of dollars to have a table at a award event for me.
Right.
And
for bragging rights, most likely.
Yeah. And it just, I feel like those are little God winks of, everything happens for a reason. And then sometimes you think you want something, but what a joy to have my own hospital that I got to name in honor of my nephew. It's such a, it wouldn't be the same as, calling it the whatever prestigious People Hospital. And it's wow, this is how it was supposed to happen.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about your nephew.
Yeah.
And that's who the hospital's named after, Ovidio.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, and it was the first time I told that story from the stage today because it's such a brutal thing to talk about. By the way, I don't know that I've ever cried on stage before. That was the first today, talking about this. But Yeah, my nephew Ovidio, he was Guatemalan. He was living in an orphanage. My sister volunteered down there for 2 years and lived with him and was in the process of adopting him. And very tragically, when she was away, she'd only left for 2 weeks. The orphanage had moved him into a foster family temporarily. I think they were taking a holiday or doing something. And in less than 2 weeks' time, I remember my little sister had just gotten back and she was on the way to go and take him some gifts. She was going to meet this family and they'd given her directions. She had that little Finding Nemo blanket that she'd sewn for him, and she got a horrific call. I mean, and luckily she did, but it was the police department. They were like, listen, you can't go and find this child. We had his death reported 3 days ago. And the foster family, who was tragically even a family member, it was an aunt, had murdered him. He was an epileptic, and she had beaten him over the head until he died. And it sounds so brutal, and I'd never heard of anything like this. And so naming the hospital in his honor was really, out of, okay, he only was alive for 4 years, but his life had meaning, and we want to treat every patient in our hospital like that, like no matter how long they have to live, because we knew we were doing palliative care. We want to honor those years. What I didn't know is how many times over and over and over and over I would see cases exactly like this.
Right.
I have kids in my hospital who have been starved, beaten, tied up, soiling all over themselves in the corners of orphanages. I've seen the worst cases of child abuse, kids cut with knives and burned, and just the worst things. And to know that, Ovi's name, it wasn't just like a namesake for him, but like it was actually, he was representing just this future that we were going after, which is to get children out of unfit living conditions, to take kids who are in this vulnerable position of not only having medical conditions, but also being orphaned, abandoned. No one's there to see whether they make it to the next day, and reuniting them with either loving foster families, people who could take care of them, putting them in a hospital like ours where no one has to pay a bill. They're seen, we have a 1 to 3 caregiver ratio, which is unheard of in hospitals and institutions. So these children come completely alone, but we have hired women who are extremely empathetic and caring moms. Right. We call them our hospital mamas, but they are actually, women who have escaped either domestic abuse or they've been widowed themselves, and these jobs empower them to take care of their own children. And in the same way, they're the moms, they're the family to our patients who come with no one. So it's this beautiful ecosystem of people who are, really lonely, really hurt, helping each other and loving each other and healing each other in that way.
Yeah, out of something very ugly, very tragic, came something very beautiful. And I think it's amazing how you've also attracted others in that community that are helping you serve those children because they've experienced their own pain.
Yeah.
And that's the human spirit, and that's what's come out of this, and that's the empathy that human beings can show.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk a little bit more about your vulnerable population, because it's not like you just help, foster kids. You help the most vulnerable. So who exactly is the patient base for OVI Hospital?
So they're children who have either been orphaned or neglected or abandoned with terminal illnesses or debilitating conditions. So things that make them bedridden, things that make them even trapped in their body. We have kids who have had polio, kids who are paralyzed from the neck down, severe cerebral palsy that are either left at bus stations or sugarcane fields. And instead of what used to happen was the police would find these children and they'd take them to orphanages where they would ultimately just die because there's nowhere to pay, no one can pay the hospital bill. Sometimes orphanages have like one caregiver for 100 kids. These kids are literally, I would find them tied up in chairs, pooping all over themselves. Like no one had the time or capacity to take care of them and their needs. And I was like, this is the most horrific thing I've ever seen in my life. So we started partnering with the police departments, telling them like, if you see children like this, like, don't take them into institutions, bring them to us first, let us get them stabilized, and then we'll seek out like, are there any living relatives that could potentially take care of them? And a lot of times there's more to the story than what you see. And we really dig and advocate and try to find the best possible outcome that we can for these children, whether it's staying with us long term, whether it's stabilizing and getting back into a community. We've even had, members of our government adopt some of the total orphans. Really? And it's really beautiful. But we've never had a child with no place to go. Oh, something always comes up. There's always a happy ending. And, whether that be that, some kids are terminally ill, just like in America. Sometimes cancer is so deadly,
right.
or, conditions are so chronic and terminal that there's nothing you can do but getting to love a child and not being afraid, because so many people are afraid of loss. And so that's where we really shine, is we don't admit kids based on outcomes, like being positive. We have something I developed called a Child Vitality Index. It's actually scored. It helps us to choose like which kids need the admission most, and help us to like shift around if things get over full. So we see if the child is like having a moderate to severe vitality, or chance of vitality. And we're able to support them in that way. Like, it's everything from, are they from a zone of famine? Like, do they have a disability? Are they able to feed themselves? Is there, anyone living who knows them? And all of these things help us to, take something that's very variable and make it standardized. That's been the key, is like, instead of just going over and handing out help randomly, how can we do this in a data-based way to where it can be repeated over and over and over to get rid of the problem? I really emphasize, I have zero desire to be the world's most successful charity. I hope that 10, 15 years from now, we don't need hospitals for orphans, because systemically, we've figured out how to get rid of the orphan crisis at the root. But in the meantime, the children are suffering and they're dying, and humanitarian aid is making it worse instead of making it better, from what I've seen boots on the ground.
I would imagine there's a ton of corruption when it comes to humanitarian aid. And someone said it best. It was Stephen Scoggins. He said, have you fundraised today? So, or have you ever fundraised before? Because he came up with such passion and challenged us all to do better. And he's like, how many of you are wearing designer stuff today?
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm like, these shoes and this belt, probably could have done a lot of good. Yeah. And all they're doing is making me feel, better about myself. But is it really? Because clicking those links today, not one time for the monthly donation, but the second time when I was challenged to do more, that made me feel good.
Yeah.
It didn't make me feel amazing, because I know there's still more that I could do. And I think people don't realize just how helpful they can be.
Yeah.
And, America, I know we take things for granted here. How many children are you currently serving?
Yeah, so with the 1-to-3 ratio and the budget that we are operating on, it's about 8 children per ward. One has 11 or 12 right now. So times 6. We did something strange in the sense that we were filling all 60 beds. And then I said, no, like I want to make sure it's really, really focused. So we've been working within our budget. It's about $9.82 a day, about $10 exactly, to cover all expenses for each child. That's on average. So we have children,
$9, let's just say $10 a day to help a child, all in.
Yeah.
I spent more on coffee this morning.
It's
so
funny though.
It is all relative and it's perspective, and I appreciate you giving us the perspective. And I wanted to dive a little deeper, if you're comfortable. Because we had a conversation on stage with the room. And if you're not comfortable sharing it, I get it. But my goal is to get the message out of how much even the average Joe or gal can do to help your organization. So you're running it on shoestring budget.
Yeah.
At $9 a day, and you're serving 60 kids. I'm not going to do the math, but you said you're about, I think, $9,000 all in terms of monthly cost to keep this amazing project and 60 children and the staff, employed and keep the engine running. And we were just blown away by that number. And the goal was to get you at least to double, which rounded up would be $20,000. And you can do this again because just like a business,
that's the thing, is
you
like,
can scale this.
Yeah. The thing we've been doing too is, we run a little bit over budget, but I mean, we work with what we have, but what we're able to do when we have more, because we've had periods where we had more and we had periods where we had much less.
Of course.
And like I said, when there's much less, it's really hard for me because I take so much pride in like the care of the children. So one thing is, a lot of times people think about children's hospitals as, especially in Africa, like a dirt floor, and kids are getting thrown a plate of beans and rice. Like, if you saw the level of like intention we put into like comfort foods, or having virtual reality therapy, because some of these kids are paralyzed from the neck down. how depressing to be stuck in a bed for the rest of your life, but to put on these goggles and get to fly a magic carpet. That's a kid who wants to stay alive, you know? And so we don't just give them the bare minimum. We really try to operate with the number of kids that we can give the best possible life in their circumstances. And so the exciting thing for me is, you know, the more donors we get, like I have this number. I'm such a systems person. I got the book E-Myth when I first opened the hospital. So I always knew, like, I'm building this like a franchise. Whether I ever have another hospital or not, I want other people to be able to take my model and end this problem. I just want it gone. If anybody wants to open a hospital anywhere, I'll tell them exactly what to do, down to point by point by point by point by point. You can know exactly how to run a hospital. If you come to me, it's done, you know? But what you can't do is, you know, you can't go beyond your means. You have to know how to do this. And that's what we've done really well at OVI is like, I know, okay, if I have $250,000 a year, I can operate an entire hospital like this, full capacity, state of the art. We're talking everything from physical therapy to child life specialists, anything you could ever want in a hospital. In Kenya, I can fund that. Kids having the best life, truly magical moments. And then once I get to that, it's like, okay, I can get that same amount of money and do it again in another place and do it again in another place and do it again in another place. And that's what I love about what we do is, you know, the more funds is just the more impact. So you never have too much.
And that's what I have realized. And I've been fortunate enough to find success on some level financially, but I don't chase the money anymore. It kind of comes because I've decided to make my life about other people, first and foremost my family, and then my family of human beings in my community where I came from. And that's why this story hit so hard for me. It's because you decided to put them first, and sometimes at the expense of yourself.
Yeah.
From what we gathered about a year ago, I guess it was one of those times of less than, and you were actually physically suffering, and you decided to take on a job doing telemedicine.
Yeah.
Part-time or full-time, I guess? No, part-time.
I started full-time. I was working from like 2 p.m. to 11 p.m., but I have two little girls, 5 and 10 years old now. And
who you also adopted, right?
Yeah. They're both from, I met them when they were 4 months and 3 months old. So I've been a mom for 10 years now.
Beautiful.
And yeah, they're my world. And the hard thing is, you know, I'm licensed in the US. And so I work these hours that are really prime hours, like from 2 to 11 was really hard because when do I have with my girls? And so now I've reduced that. I usually work from about 2 to 7. Between every patient, I'm always running downstairs, spending time with my girls, and then, you know, sacred hour and a half every night from dinner to bedtime. And that's not ideal. Like I would much rather be having that time with my children, but at the same time, there's something so powerful about like knowing, okay, even if I didn't have enough donors, I could bootstrap this month. Like I just wanted to have enough funds to take care of me, take care of my children. My youngest daughter, the big wake up call was we found out my youngest daughter was deaf. And it was going to cost $150,000 to have a cochlear implant surgery for her.
Oh, wow.
And at this time I was living at the hospital, no money. I had a couple side gigs, like I sold skincare. I've done everything on the side you could ever imagine, just like little gigs to make a little income.
Because you don't take anything from the charity, just to be clear.
Yeah.
And you even flew out here on your own dime.
Yeah.
Which even if you did coach, God bless your soul, is pretty expensive.
Yeah, it is.
So the telemedicine was to help support you and your daughters so that you would not go without, but you also wouldn't dip into the organization.
Exactly. I wanted that surgery for my daughter, and she's had it now 3 months. That was one of our miracles is I worked so hard. Even when I started getting even a fraction of the money, I was like, oh, I just, you know, we had a visa denied, which was horrible, like awful, heartbreaking experience. So I couldn't get her here. And then I tried to, you know, get it in Kenya, and they canceled it. And then the Princess of Morocco ended up sponsoring 7 children in Kenya, only to be flown, all expenses paid, to have this operation in Morocco. I mean, when we got there, it was the biggest miracle. They not only did this surgery, which is valued so much, she heard for the first time. My daughter had no hearing. She'd never heard a sound. But they even gave us like spending cash. They brought us pajamas and toys and all these things every day. And that's when I was like, oh, it really comes around. Like it really happens. And, you know, but at the same time, that pressure was also what got me to the place of making that step to be able to take care of my family. And I do think shifting from that energy of living in the hospital and eating the hospital food and having nothing for my own to having enough to buy a plane ticket, it did shift me into a place that's like, okay, I think you have to do that.
And you didn't grow up wealthy, but you didn't grow up poor either.
Yeah.
So you gave up comfort.
Yeah.
To be very uncomfortable, but to do God's work.
Yeah.
What role has faith played in this whole thing?
I think everything has been run by miracles, just from the hospital being donated by an anonymous donor, wild, there's so many miracles that, I don't know, after a few, you just know that it's happening. And it doesn't mean it's not painful. It's kind of crazy because it's going to work out, but I do think you get pushed to the moment and then you're like, oh, it always happens. And it even felt that way today, getting on the stage. I don't like asking for money. I don't like sharing numbers. I like to be in a positive mood and just tell people, but I always know it's always that breaking point, that vulnerable moment when God shows up and you see big things happen,
Yeah, and so many people rallied around you.
Yeah.
You didn't have to ask for money from the stage because they did.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the struggle that most people have, and I'm going to be vulnerable and honest here, which is I did the $15 a month because I have charities here close to my heart at home. And the selfish part of me was saying, but my people here need this. And then someone challenged everybody in the room with a big number that they matched. And someone else came and said, I'll give 20 grand if, the collective of the room can match that. And then Ken came on and then I said, I'll match you. And I made my partner match us.
Yeah.
And, we just said, we're going to get to that number. So we were able to raise a decent amount of money, but I know that we can do a lot better. And I know that your mission is to duplicate this. What do you see as the vision for the short term and also for the long term for OVI Hospital?
Yeah. So my goal, first, by the end of this year, I wanted this hospital, all expenses covered. We don't have to blink. We have the monthly recurring donations. We know that every child is taken care of so that we can be at capacity. That was my goal for the end of the year. And then over the next 15 years, I'd really love to open 11 more hospitals in Kenya. I think the problem's big enough to where we could exhaust that much even in country. But one thing that's been popping up recently is a lot of other African countries have kind of figured out what we're doing. So we've had people, I shouldn't probably drop names of prime ministers, but from, some really poor African countries, like some of the most poor and dangerous even countries in the world that they want us to come. They want us to do the same system. And I know how, and I know that I could do it. Even if I'm not there personally, I've built it in a way that if the funds are there, if someone wants to do the project, I can tell them exactly how to operate it. And I have the accountability and the systems and the technology even that's built out to be able to duplicate the hospital, which I think is the powerful piece I've been waiting for. Because I tell everyone I have a backwards problem. I see a lot of charities that they get a whole lot of money and then they have to play catch up and show that they've made the impact.
Oh, yeah.
We've made a ton of impact and had very, very little money.
Yep.
So I'm like, okay, we know how to impact. We've proven that we can do it with nothing.
Right.
Basically apocalyptic level funds.
Right.
We've run this hospital. So if we did have people who are like, oh, I want to commit $250,000 a year to having my own hospital in XYZ country, I could do that for them, And that's what I think is really beautiful because to me, I don't care to be the face of the hospital or this or that. Like anybody who would love to do this, that's what OVI really wants to do is collaborate with people all over the world to end children being in these desperate situations. It's hard for me to believe that in this modern world, there are kids who are tied up and suffering and starving and dying in institutions that think that's acceptable. That we've even... It's hard, right? If you look around the modern world and the luxuries and the things that we even think about even in America, like the helicopter parents and the way that we're so obsessed with every single thing our children do. And then there's children who no one knows them, no one looks out for them. And I have to really fight for children sometimes. And I know other countries are even worse where, kids come from terrible levels of abuse and then they go right back into those homes. And that's one thing that we really do and we stand in for children is no child leaves our hospital just because they're better. They leave the hospital because they're better and we found a more fit, loving family environment that can support them. We will not put a child back in an institution. We will not put a child back with an abuser. And unfortunately, some of these systems are so broken that kids get put back in these situations and they die within days. Exactly what happened to my nephew. You know, if a child's not being advocated for and they live in a country that isn't at the capacity to protect them, this is what happens.
I'd like to encourage you before we go and also give you the practice of looking directly at our audience and doing something that scares you. Even though you have the social proof and you have the heart of gold and you're doing God's work, I would like to give you an opportunity to do one more rep to get over that hump of your own fear of asking for. There's very few people that ask for money, and you know that this money is going to go to a good cause, and every dollar is going to be used exactly how it said it's going to be used.
It's true.
So our audience would like to hear why they should donate to you, what their money is going to go to do, how little it takes to impact some of these children's lives, and where they can find you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So for as little as $15 a month, you can become a monthly sponsor who receives actually a card that's handwritten. So our children, they can't all write. Most of them are even nonverbal, but the staff will actually sit and write a handwritten note, tell you about the child. They include a card with usually a handprint on it, and you see a picture of the kid holding the card that they made for you. And then on the back of the picture, we always have a prayer request, a way that you can pray for that child and be intimately involved in their life. They're sent out at random, so every month you get a different child and the opportunity to pray for them and support them in that way. And like I said, that's as little as $15 a month. We also have opportunities for corporate sponsors to come alongside us. So excitingly, we had 2 join us today, and we're looking for 3 more corporate sponsors to join us by the end of the year at a commitment of either $30,000 a year or $2,500 a month. That's also a relationship that we really love to build in a corporate giving back way. We want to show, your customers, your audience, the amazing things that you're doing for the world. So it's a very unique and intimate opportunity for us to work together to we're a US 501c3, so it's totally tax deductible for you, but we also want to give, your customers, your community, your employees something to be proud of, something to strive for. And I think, to me, it's the only life I would ever want to live. It's the most important mission, and I do think it's an honor to get to be a part of it. And so I want to offer that opportunity to more people to come alongside us by the end of the year.
Well, it's been my honor and my privilege to tell your story, help you tell your story, rather. Where can our audience find you on social media and also online?
Everything is always OVI Children's Hospital. So we pronounce it OV Children's Hospital, but OVIChildren'sHospital.org. It's OV Children's Hospital on Instagram, TikTok, any of it. So,
all right. So you heard it here. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in on this special edition of the Real Mentors podcast. I'm so honored and privileged to have hosted you, and I cannot wait to see you again. Not if, but when. And I know Troy and Elena were encouraging me and my family to go out to Kenya.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not only see the hospital, but get a great experience. And I forgot about that. There's also
a trip coming up.
Correct. You also host trips. Tell us a little bit about that before we go, actually.
Yeah. So we're going to have a trip next year. It's called our Impact and Adventure Journey. And it's a beautiful experience in Kenya. So you'll get to go through the Masai Mara, which is the best safari in the world. I've been on multiple. I can tell you there's none like it. We're going to take you to the hospital for a 2-day immersive experience where you can see firsthand what we do with the children. You'll get to host a remote medical camp where we go out and see even sometimes 300 children in a day in the most remote regions where they can't get healthcare at all. And then we have a waterfall chase. We have a time on the coast of Kenya, and then a day of reflection and impact strategy, seeing, how are we going to make a difference moving forward? So Troy and his family are going. Troy is a hugely successful businessman,
and a great person.
Much insight. Just him alone, I think, is a total pitch, like to get to spend a week with him and to get advice from him. And what I will say is Troy, makes businesses explode. He's the best in the world at getting people to exit successfully. And so to get to be with us in one of the most beautiful places, in the most impactful thing I've ever been a part of, and to learn from someone like him. And if you're a friend of the hospital, you're a friend of Troy. He really rallies beside the people. So I'm so excited to see who we bring together. There's only 15 spots total. So it'll be a good, intimate group. And by the end of it, I think we'll all be so close and moved and, passionate for what we do.
Well, awesome. I want to thank you for your passion, your purpose, and most importantly, your heart.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank everybody for tuning in. As always, let's get it. We're going to have all of Iza and OVI Hospital's information in the bio. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.